So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the value of SIP to the companies and our people that we work with today. To do that, I'm going to compare and contrast it to the way we have been doing telecommunications, and to show you an example. So let's look at the way we've been doing it. If you take a traditional PBX and let this represent that, and if you look at how we trunk and handle calls in and out of that PBX, we bring in traditional T1s into the PBX, a trunk at a time. They come in through a hardware dedicated wire CSU DS1 boards that are built into the PBXs, and the calls are handed out to traditional phones. These phones could be analog phones, these phones could be digital phones, or even IP phones that we have been putting out for the last 10 years. But the calls are still brought in through the PBX infrastructure. You have a lot of hardware that you have to deal with here in the middle. If the call needs to be handled by a voicemail system, then the trunked call is then brought out to an adjunct system that might be a voicemail system out here. If the call is going into a call center environment, it might be brought out to an external ACD. And so the call is being routed in and out of the PBX, and it's taking a lot of hardware and TDM connectivity to provide that. What gets even worse is if you have multiple PBXs out here, then those same calls have to not only be routed in and out of this PBX, but they might have to be routed in and out of that PBX, or maybe transferred over to that PBX. And the cost of the hardware and the bandwidth and the dedicated facilities to do that, get pretty extreme, and we've been all dealing with how to reduce that over the last few years and how to be better and better at it. Well, SIP has a better example, a better answer, and I want to provide a way of helping us to see that. So instead of doing what we're doing here, wouldn't it make a whole lot more sense to build what I'm going to call a SIP cloud in your company? And this would be an intra-company cloud. In that cloud, we would have to have something that's in that cloud to help us deal with how to route these calls. And in a VIA world, we call that thing Session Manager. And what Session Manager is, it's best can be described as a man-in-the-middle router. So for instance, and I want to use this as an example, instead of having these dedicated T1 trunks coming in here, I'm going to have some SIP trunks that are coming into this cloud. And the SIP trunks are going to handle inbound calls. So for instance, if I do have an old PBX or even a new PBX that's off here to the side, and if I do have a phone that's hanging off that PBX of some sort, then the trunk that comes into this SIP cloud would come into this SIP cloud and get routed to this PBX and then sent to that phone. And you say, well, that's not much different than what we're doing over here. But let's add some additional things to it. Instead of putting this voicemail system over here behind this PBX, what if I just put this voicemail system right off that SIP cloud? And that way, when the call goes in, and it's not really for someone on the PBX, it's going to be handled by voicemail. It would be directed directly to the voicemail. Let's also consider, maybe that call is going to be, sent off to another location. And so I might have other PBXs that are plugged into this SIP cloud. And when that happens, the call doesn't have to be routed in and out of these different systems. The call goes to the cloud and then it gets directed to the SIP thing. But the real advantage to this is how that call is manipulated. For instance, when a call comes in, it has two segments. It has a very thin signaling segment, and it has a very thick bearer channel segment. So when it comes to all the CPU and the hardware necessary to handle the call, it takes very little to handle this signaling segment. It takes quite a bit to handle this bearer channel. So in SIP world, when a call comes in, the bearer channel just gets anchored at something we call an SBC, a Session Border Controller. And the bearer channel just gets anchored right there. So it comes in and it stops. It doesn't get routed around to all this other thing. And in the meantime, the signaling goes on into that SIP cloud to those Session Manager boxes. And the Session Manager is, again, kind of that man-in-the-middle router. And it bounces around to determine where that call is supposed to go. And if that call ends up maybe needing to go to a SIP phone, then it signals over and says, I got a call for Ken Cook on the SIP phone, extension 1234. And then once it's determined that, then the bearer channel is routed directly to the phone. And it doesn't go through all this other infrastructure to get there. If I'm not at my phone and it needs to go to my voicemail system, then it can just pull that bearer channel right back. and send it directly to the voicemail system. And in the meantime, this very thin signaling source is being handled in the middle. This is why a session manager server, a little one-year server, can handle up to 50,000 users, because all it's handling is this very slim signaling. So this makes a whole lot more sense when it comes to managing telecommunications in a very cost-effective manner than doing it the old way by using multiple boxes and lots of hardware. And that's one of the big advantages of SIP.